for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We've completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan, and nationally, and internationally, and even in Spaceland. There's an argument that we evolved from the cannabis plant. Let's just be honest, okay?
Ow, what's going on, everybody? How y'all doing?
420th episode. I've got an agenda here. I usually resist agendas, and I will tell you that I'm not really going to follow this.
If you're a connoisseur, you're going to want the good stuff. And if you want the good stuff, you're going to go for the mom and pop stuff because that's the good stuff.
It's just a real pleasure to come here and congratulate you on your 420th show, and thank you for having me on a few times over the 420.
Alrighty.
We have launched.
Welcome, everybody. You're listening to Planet Green Trees. I'm your host, Michael Komorn. We're officially beginning and starting with the show. Episode number 442. We're calling it Frisbee Rolling and Waiting for Schuyler.
Oh, no. Say it
because
correctly.
that rhymes.
Right.
Frisbee Rolling and Waiting for Colin.
Colon.
Okay. All right, whatever.
Colon.
So, let's introduce the guests. That's next on the agenda. We have an agenda we're going to try to follow tonight. We'll start with Tommy in the corner over there running the board, wearing the white trunks and the black shoes. Tommy Two-Tone.
Hey, guys, how's it going? Great to be here. Looking forward to the show.
That sounded sincere.
Mr. Entertainment himself, the one and only founder of Michigan Parents for Compassion, our dear friend Jim Powers.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. Good evening, Michael. Excited for a great show tonight, and excited to talk about our very good friend Ken Stecker and
Want
what
to talk about him?
he's been up to, and
We saw that.
fuck Bill
There
Shooter.
you go.
Yeah.
Absent last week, but for a good reason.
The best reason.
Did you get a hall pass,
Yeah, I got one.
back
I asked
from
for
the
permission
Purple
before I
pass.
left.
back from the Purple State? It's a Purple State you were at, right? Is that
It
what
was
you call
Purple State. I was on the Purple Pilgrimage,
That's right.
and now I'm
And
back.
now you're ready to let's go crazy.
Let's go crazy.
Please welcome the one and only Debra.
It's so nice to be back.
You're
Glad
missed.
to see you. Everybody looks so
Definitely
chipper.
missed.
They really do.
Oh, thank you.
And,
Everybody just looks so happy.
I'm happy because of the pizza
The
tonight.
pizza was delicious.
Nice job on the pizza, by the way. We do usually have a nice spread here, Planet Green Trees.
It's pretty good.
I would say next,
Pretty good.
glad he's back. Feeling artistic tonight, I can tell.
He's
And
great.
appreciate you being here, Mr. Responsible for everything that was good and still is good and will be good in the future, right? Is that what you're promising? The one and only Jamie Lowell.
Hello. Nice to be here. I'm glad the drive is 20 minutes and not an hour and a half.
Excellent. Our benefit from the convenience now. So we missed Rick. Rick's birthday is today. We should probably give a shout out to that, right?
Happy birthday,
Happy
Rick.
Yeah, Rick.
He's
all right.
listening. And maybe we can get him to call and do some news, or Jamie's going to handle that for tonight.
Maybe.
Alan Peisner, we want to give a shout out to him. I talked to him before, and he was giving out some good, solid legal advice as we discuss and analyze some things, and maybe we can convince him to call in a little bit later, too. There he goes, right?
Unlikely.
I want to say shout out and a thank you to the Students for Sensible Drug Policy at the Auburn Hills campus of Oakland Community College, where I was today for a little bit this afternoon, talking about the new rec laws and driving issues and things to that effect. And I appreciate their interest, and we had a good time out there.
I'm glad that the community college has got an SSDP chapter. That's pretty
Oh, yeah.
cool.
They're pretty on top of things, too, you know. It's always good being in a educational environment, people, you know, wanting to learn and stuff, and haven't heard me talk yet and seem to be somewhat interested.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's important.
that I have audiences that haven't heard me talk before. I appreciate that. Try to be sarcastic. All right, so we got some topics here for the show. We are going to not in any particular order, and not even guaranteed that we're going to stick with these. But first, Michigan awards the first marijuana license, paving the way for December 1st sales.
Mm-hmm.
Some have actually been awarded. And rules associated with that, maybe in controversy as to what how the patients community feels about that. We can talk about that.
Where is the product coming
Well,
from?
I mean, Andrew Brisbane was talking about going in a particular direction, and then all of a sudden, a different move was made by the state. So there's an
Right.
interesting conversation there.
Boom.
The only available cannabis has got to come from the medical.
Right.
It's got to. I mean, where else is it coming from? Nobody's
It
had
is.
any
There's
time
a
to
one-time
grow
shift
anything.
of half your
It's coming
inventory.
from the same place it's always come from.
Right. Well, we know that, but I'm just saying it's all medical.
Yeah.
Nobody,
but not for
nobody's
long.
But nobody's had a recreational grow license long enough to grow anything.
Right, but now it can convert. It's like a unicorn. It just exists.
I know it can
It's good.
convert, but it converts from something.
Yeah.
Well, it's clear, there's some interesting dynamics that are in play here. One is, I guess we're talking about topic one. We're just going with it. The
Fuck it.
Look at us, topic one.
Yeah.
It's fine.
First,
I was
wow.
just introducing them. I was just teasing them.
Well,
We're on it. Fine. So clearly, there's been a proclamation by LAR that they want to try to get out ahead of, even early, the recreational sales of marijuana. I think that there's a couple of reasons. One, I think that in a way they're committed to trying to see these entities and businesses that have paid all this money survive. And I've said all along, I think everyone agrees that in order for any of these medical facilities to survive, they have to have a greater customer base than the 300,000 patients that exist, right? And I don't know that any of them believed or anticipated that then we got in it, they were going to be able to survive with $50,000 to $80,000 a year licensing fees and whatnot to be able to survive when the prices of what they're selling it for is still higher than the normal market. All these costs and oversight fees that go with it, and that they're going to be able to survive in some of these areas with the limited customer base that exists. Jamie, is there a debate about this?
About what the facts of what you were describing? No, there's issues in some people's mind about how the inventory is.
I understand, but I'm
it's
saying
gonna
of
be
the
low.
medical facilities, they are not offering for sale flour at a price that's competitive with what would be described as caregiver prices. Can we agree to that?
It's about double.
Yeah, so there has for
Okay.
for a couple different reasons.
For a couple-
Scarcity
scarcity.
and then also the difficulty when the caregiver stuff was not as accessible by way of direct
Retail.
connection with the retail stores, right?
Sure.
That slowed that kind of a flow
Sure.
down too.
And one could even argue that the way the program is set up places great weight and energy and resources and financial expenditure on the growing, the transporting, the testing, the processing, the
all
transporting
the layers.
until it gets this, and not really contemplating the end user product. So if we have a disparity of price of double than what it normally is, it is not an incentive, and it can't be competitive with the existing market that patients know and understand. So what I'm saying to you is, do you think people anticipated that? Do you think that any of these places with that circumstance in play are operating at a profit?
Well, this is what we've been saying for months
Okay.
and months, for a couple of
Jamie.
years. We already know that. And anybody who went into business and did not understand that, something's wrong with them.
So
Yeah.
it seemed as though the thought was, especially after the rough rollout of MMFLA,
Sure.
that there was some forethought into stretching this out in a way that allows for more participation by the other parts of the system
Sure.
that need to be in place first to make it kind of be complete circuit. And in fact, there were reports with Andrew Brisbane saying we think that probably by April, after the first quarter, the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, that type of stuff, that the activity will be up and moving. And then within just days of that, it all got moved up with extra rules in place about putting half the inventory over into
I know, but before we even get to that, as Andrew's decision, I'm asking the question: do we think that these and I'm saying because from the business's perspective, they think they were going to be in the situation that they were going to be able to survive with a patient customer base only, and are they making profits with, and can they survive under the current marketplace?
Well, I mean, some places yes,
I was
some
gonna say,
places
depending on
struggle.
where they are,
But how many they allow in a place, how populated the area is, some fact, how good the place is, how good the quality and service of the product is, and all that kind of stuff. But for sure, when anybody 21 and over can purchase it, and we know there's estimates of being nearly 1.5 million users in the state, that's a better situation for a retail store.
Okay.
No
Well,
question about it.
Okay, so there's a disparity in the competition. There's a disparity in the opportunity. There's a lot of regulatory factors that are interfering with organic economics. So recreational is getting rolled out. Lara knows that these businesses need this additional market and are trying to do what they can to not have the same mistakes of the rollout of MMFLA. They've got the applications out. They got the rules out. The administrative rules now. They're ready to roll. They're ready to take up. They're taking applications. They're flipping stuff over.
Let's sell some weed.
But there's no. It's the same pot to split.
Of course it is.
Same weed.
They even regulated. They even regulated a promise to the business owners of the MMFLA that they would have first shot to get their money back.
That's right.
For 2 years. Now, what's interesting about that, before we talk about the problem with this announcement, how they changed, is that can we all agree that after 2 years, meaning from now until, 2021, December, right? The only people that will be able to own those 5 licenses are those that have MMFLA license,
We're
right?
already in business.
Who are already in business.
Sure.
They pay $50,000 to $80,000 a year to maintain that license. Any license held of those 5 allows them to get any of the license for recreational. And they have a 2-year period of time where they're going to have to pay to keep their medical.
It could be one. It could be. I'm not saying it will be, but it could be one.
What do you mean?
How could it be?
The law says that after a year, the department...
Right, they don't have to. It's up to 2 years.
Right.
They could decide.
So
that
the department could
right.
say the system is unable to adequately support or supply the need.
Or because of the slow rollout, everybody who's going to do it has
Getting more
had
licenses, right?
Yeah.
or something.
Especially on
All
the
right.
grow side.
We'll see what happens with that. But what's interesting is that by the fact that they created the 1 year before everyone else can get a recreational license, and then it is an even playing field after that, tell me what MMFLA business owner is going to ante up for the regulatory fee the following year of $50,000 to $80,000 just to keep their MMFLA license.
No. Once the MRTMLA license is in full bore,
For
there is
everybody.
no reason to pay
They
the.
can sell
That's
to
why
everybody,
the MMFLA will eventually be
Eaten up
dissolved.
by the,
Yeah.
right. So by virtue of the rec law and the way the way the administrative rules laid out, they clearly created an incentive drive for recreational with the intention or the consequence of which the eating up of the medical program, right? For all purposes, or identifying that those individuals.
Yeah, but everybody knew that.
Sooner they get
mean,
it going, the
not all
sooner
states
it's
are like that. Not all states are like. First of all, there's an interesting factor that there's no patient tax anymore, right?
Right.
So, what's going to happen after that? They're going to eat up the program. There's no other cannabis that will be sold to patients anymore. If you're
Well,
a
no,
patient,
I think the program will eventually morph to the point that it's one supply, it's one regulated system, and if you're a patient, you don't pay tax.
okay.
Right, exactly. You have a card that says you're a patient. you just don't
But
pay
that's a
tax.
morphing of the system, right?
Mhm.
And
I think it's going to happen faster than people think.
okay. Am I? Is it strange for me to think that sounds disparaging to patients?
I would say that at the end of the day,
Is there such
Having
thing
a-
as medical
well-
marijuana, Jim?
of course there is.
So I just want to say, as far as that goes, while the MMFLA system likely won't survive versus the MRTMA, it will still behoove MRTMA retail stores to have products that medical patients would want to use.
Of
That
course.
market will still exist.
Will it?
I know that. Yeah,
Yes.
because I
Will
know
it?
that.
Because
Yes,
because the question becomes,
well,
who's going to be their market? I
well,
mean, if
some
they're getting
peop-
more
some
business,
people
if they're more draw from the 2 million, recreational users, and that's who,
It'll be somebody's going to have to decide. There's a market there, and somebody's going to have to decide who is going to make the money off of it. I know that our company, the Botanical Company in East Taos, is planning on even after MMFLA participation goes away, because we know that that's on the horizon. We are still going to cater to the people who need certain products. People don't go into a rec store and buy a CBD-based suppository because they're going to party on it, but it's something that they might be using that helps out to benefit
Right.
their life in some way. So
I would
those
s-
products will still be available.
My comment was that I didn't think any businesses would still do that. You're making that proclamation. Let's mark the date and the record of.
I've
November 20,
forecasted that and the
2019.
need for it, and I've been talking about
That's fine.
firing up
Yeah.
ASA again in the state in order to be available for places to have a reference to know how to fulfill that market even after the MMFLA is gone.
And if there's a demand
Or
for
some
it,
other organization that could
Yeah.
fill that role. Maybe the Michigan Medical
I mean,
Marijuana Association.
I'm glad you read my mind because I was about to
Yeah.
launch at you about that. Right?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
well
good.
that might be the easy way out then, because you have to go through a bunch of extra fucking hoops to work with a great organization, but with ASA.
Yeah. There's only 2 or 3 hoops for the MMA.
So Jamie kind of. Jim, you were ready to abandon medical for recreational, feeling like that. But
It's all one system.
okay. I get that, but there's certain needs and
I
desires
understand,
of
and,
ingestion.
and
All right,
there'll be
fine.
a demand, and the market will supply the demand.
All right, so that's fine. So no one's worried about that. That's not an issue down
No,
the
I am
road?
worried. I'm worried about that. That's why I want to be prepared to
Okay.
remind stores to do that and to help those who
All right,
need the
what-
help with those types of
business
products.
is business, and when the drive of this is business, you got to pay $80,000 a year.
I don't mind finding that balance, because
All right.
there's a market for this, meaning somebody should do that
as
business.
soon as there's
or-
enough product. The beginning's going to be very sketchy, and then when there's enough
No,
product,
I
I
got
think
it. Listen, I understand.
The market has already proven itself.
Listen, it's a reality that's going to happen. That there's a possibility. What the impact's going to be if it goes in this particular direction and everything's morphed together? Is it going to impact the patients? Is everyone going to listen to Jamie? Maybe, probably.
Maybe.
If they're smart, they will. There may be places that don't want to bother. They're just living on the edge. They can barely pay their bills.
No,
and
but
they
then
don't-
maybe the caregiver system then becomes more important at that point.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's important that the caregiver system not break down, the actual MMA caregiver system, because it would seem as if the path that we're going on doesn't recognize that, and or the price of marijuana goes up, the system is still not, leveled itself. Why should patients have to, who've been, patients forever, whatever the period of time, be morphed into recreational marijuana,
Why not?
commerce?
Why not? It increases. It's going to make the system bigger. The system will be more robust.
Fine. The question I'm asking is, does it make a difference? And I say that it depends upon the store. It depends on the place. It depends on their concerns for the products that they're buying, what they're ordering to be processed. Are places getting CBD suppositories at the rec places? You know what I mean? If they can sell, if their inventory is all flour and they got 2 people that
I
are.
will manually apply the CBD in the event that becomes an issue in the future. That can be written down also.
It's too bad he can't be sold in a package. That'd be great. I bet a lot of people would buy that.
God help us. Tommy, why do you allow this?
All right, so
Isn't it
the
time for a
story is
break?
that. So what happened? So the director of Lara, he's the king of it all.
King Brisboe. Yeah.
King Rizzo said
Right.
the point in time that people should be able to anticipate the selling of cannabis in recreational stores is April-ish, meaning
Yeah.
people are going to get licenses now. They'll start to grow. By then, we'll have a bunch of places and everything will be in order, and we'll have a supply chain. There are no bending of any administrative rules allowing for caregivers to participate. Do we agree on that?
I
Right.
didn't see
Very
anything.
indirectly under the new rules, because half the inventory, which could be
Sure,
derived.
okay, that's
Some of
fine.
it
But not directly. Okay, they did not opt for, because this is a question I got the other day. What do I do with my overages from my 12 plants that I'm growing? Can I sell that at a recreational? I love it. Isn't that
No,
great?
there are no overages.
That is cute.
Isn't
There's
that
no
great?
overages.
Cute.
You can keep everything.
Okay, like you
It's
only, but you
yours.
only know that because of the abuse from the MMA. There's no overages. There was no overages of the MMA. Now there is overages.
It's just
Now
more
there's
than
no
what you
overages.
need.
Right.
Okay, but you can understand, I'm going to grow a lot more than, oh my God, did I just do that again? I'm going to grow a lot more than 2.5 ounces or 10 ounces. I heard that someplace
Yeah.
recently.
So what?
That was
Well, so
Jamie.
what? You
What do I
can
do
keep
with my
it-
overages? Can I
Stick-
take it to a recreational
It
center?
was
Smoke
Come on.
Jamie.
Closet.
Right.
I
just-
mean, is that not
Put
a
it in
solution
jars.
to the supply chain?
You
There,
can-
the big
No, I hope
complaint
that
is
I hope that can happen.
yeah,
Something
you
like
get a
that.
refrigerator.
The
for
rules
your
came out, I
garage
didn't
and
see
you
'em in
stack the
there.
jars out
So
there.
no, and it won't happen for a while. But but a way for like a testing lab to test the batch or to satisfy the issues. Reason why they were run through the cultivation and the processors now, so they can be put through the testing thing before they go to the metric system and all that kind of stuff. If there's a way to do that more directly with the small batches that somebody might have with the testing company or something like that, and that part could get
So it's not as
solved.
expensive, you're saying.
Yeah,
on the
there's
caregiver
an
side.
expense there, and there's a difficulty in like a tech coming out to maybe take samples from a 15-ounce batch or something like that. That kind of added expense.
Aren't they
in there.
supposed to destroy it too if it tests bad? So you've given them.
Well, you can that'd have to be worked out. Maybe they could just keep it, since it didn't pass or whatever. They were going to keep it anyway.
But they do want
But
an absorbent
they would have I would assume the same ability now to remediate or to send it or to maybe see if they could get it to a processor. I don't know.
I don't know
I
either.
don't. All that shit would have to be worked out, but I would like to see it where anybody who's got some stuff that qualifies for making it to the commercial market, they can get reimbursed for it a little bit.
That'd be nice.
Well, obviously, one of the solutions is what we're talking about here. One of the ways that they were able to facilitate the rolling out of the MMFLA was to rely on caregivers, and that
Yeah,
worked.
but they needed such a large amount for testing. I mean,
They
you had
could-
to
they
give
could
up a
turn-
huge
Sure.
amount for
Well,
testing.
They could turn to
It's a big
caregivers.
loss.
They could make it easier. Now, I don't think that that's on the discussion. You know what I mean? And even
I
the
don't think
idea
it
that
is either.
caregivers are going to be around in 2 years when the morphing of the medical marijuana program into recreational happens. Jim, do you think they are going to?
No,
You think caregivers are going to be around? Is there going to be 40,000 caregivers in
I
2
don't.
years?
And people get really upset when I say that. And
Now,
it's
but
not,
do you
it's
mean
not that I want
do you mean legislatively, or just won't be as much participation because of circumstances?
No, I think that once the system really takes off, that there's going to be a major push in Lansing to completely eliminate home-based grows.
Could be.
Isn't the argument
all
that the
home-based
medical
grows?
Yep.
isn't the argument that the medical program is going to be morphed into the recreational, and unless you
Yes.
have Jamie Lowell as an anointed spokesperson for patients going from place to place and them taking his anointing oil, that only under those circumstances can patients be protected, and the legislature to act should be doing nothing other than protecting caregivers.
Well,
and
it would
patients?
require the supermajority to stop the caregiver system from existing, wouldn't it?
Uh-huh.
All right, so they're not going to go to the caregivers or the recreational 12 growers to supply the market, even though there's going to be a shortage. Instead, we hear complaints from business groups, mind you, who have been hallowing the tax and regulate program, bracing the rules, not asking questions, not concerns for why or how the price is so high, not making adjustments, recommendations of more caregivers. I don't think the business organizations are pro-caregiver. I don't think that the current state of thought amongst most legislatures are pro-caregiver. I think that if you asked anyone that has had a coming to, Buddha moment where they all of a sudden were in favor of recreational marijuana or medical, that they do not associate that with caregiving. And I would think that this whole idea of where we are right now, and even though Jamie's words I think are important, I don't think, and I like talking about it too. I don't know, for some reason I'm drawn to wanting caregivers to be part of the system. I don't know if caregivers want to be part of the system, but some do.
Yeah, some do.
Some do. But nevertheless, I find myself talking about it too. I feel these days that there's a, without reasoning, logic, or debate, an arrival of thought that is consistent and a talking point across this issue of tax and regulate. As long as it falls into the guise of our regulatory scheme, and we can be there, know where it is, see it in the system, and only under those circumstances are we going to be okay with it. Can you imagine 2-3 years down the road, caregiving, where you're going in your basement still or someplace else, and not having to identify where you are? I mean, the whole goal here is to kind of motivate you to identify where you are, be subject to inspections, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
be part of a regulated system,
That's
highly
right.
regulated system.
so, in other words, they did not make a rule in the MRTMA clearing a path for caregivers to be caregivers and play. They said, no, come and play under this new theory of 100 plant,
Yeah.
Class A license. And that's what a caregiver should do. Don't be a caregiver. Do this,
That's
right?
That wasn't necessary. It was that you are attributing some additional baggage to that thought process.
Well, let me ask you this way. Is there any MRTMA recognition
for
of
those
caregiving?
who want to be?
No.
For those caregivers who would like to join the commercial system,
It's a path.
the best way under the circumstances we were working with, and in fact, Deborah originally was the one who suggested this idea at an early meeting with some members of MPP and others, was to make at least one of these options something very easy for a caregiver to scale up to. That was the point there. Whether or not that plays out to be something as intended, or solves the issue that we're dealing with now is one thing. But it wasn't like, let's not do something better for them. Let's just do this for them. That wasn't really the attitude. It was to try to do the best we could for them under the circumstances. We weren't going to be able to include the caregivers into the legalization. You can't reference the caregivers in the
No,
legalization.
but offer them a license
Sure.
that's close to what they're doing anyway at a questionably reasonable fee.
Okay, but I'm saying when Laura looked at the various options that they had for the administrative rules, emergency rules,
Mm-hmm.
they had the same choices of sources that they had when they did the MMFLA, and they could have called on whomever they wanted to or any other sources that existed. They didn't.
True.
I do, listen, caregivers all the time wanted to get year after year, hey, tell me how to do it so I can, I want to do it right, blah, 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 blah. And there wasn't any path, and now there's a path, and I get that, but it is certainly one that does not involve the traditions associated with caregiving. It's a completely different way of participating in the system.
Right.
All right. Did anyone take issue with the what's the business organization that
MCIA,
whatever? Yeah, okay.
Michigan Cannabis Industry
What-
Association.
I don't know who it was, but one of them that makes representations as spokespeople for the industry were outraged by this. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I found that shocking because I don't know that, and their outrage was because they felt that the patients, the end users, were going to be shortchanged here. Tell me how that can be an argument that's made now under the current system, which is patients are getting shortchanged under the current system if they participate.
I'm sure it's hard for that particular person to negate everything that's happened in the past, and that's where that perspective is coming from. And
And it's
that,
a bullshit argument.
it's a bullshit argument, but I'm just saying that's where that's coming from because
Okay.
you're dealing with somebody who was very involved in the medical
These-
part. So
These
Okay,
dispensary owners
They-
they're not being forced to,
No,
to do this.
they're not.
It's voluntary. So
Mhm.
if these businesses are really truly that concerned about patient access, they can choose to not supply the recreational
Yes.
market.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. The statements made by this group that
which is a
boohoo
business
patients,
group, right? It's supposed
these
to be a business
boohoo
group.
patients statements are the same out of the same mouths that are knocking caregivers, right? They don't care if the patients get it. They wanted them to get it only from them and
Well,
their
they were
place.
talking about the dirty black
Not
market
all of them,
and
but
all
in
this
some
stuff,
cases,
yeah.
yes.
Well,
You know,
the
contaminated black
Well,
market.
I
and
think-
blah,
I don't
blah,
think that
blah.
organization or any of the business organizations are advocating for caregiver participation.
They aren't.
None
but-
of them are. Okay, so and I'm saying this just so I'm clear: the caregiver participation is the only current method by which they can get additional supply into the market and reduce the price
Yes.
for patients. If you're only talking about end user patient satisfaction,
and diversity of selection.
diversity, selection,
and
price
higher
points,
quality usually.
quality. then let's talk about the best way to get it there. Don't say we're going to ignore the best way to get it there and this artificial way is the only way to get it, and then complain later that the patients aren't being treated fairly by this new choice that business owners can make to either share their supply after 30 days with the recreational market or not.
But they're right to be scared. The business owners are, because this problem that, and this is all just theoretical, obviously, and just my opinion, but the biggest issue with a lot of these businesses is trying to scale fast enough. And if the demand is there and the existing businesses are unable to scale, these big national companies that have already perfected the processes are going to come in and they're going to take over. And there has not, I mean, truly been enough time for them to get a foothold within the MMFLA. That system is still broken.
The only reason why they're vulnerable is because they can't compete in the marketplace with the best price and quality.
Yes.
And it's because of there being no competition, the overly controlled of the marketplace, but in their own doing. You know what I mean? Their own doing that they have to command the marketplace. And I get that this is how the system was relegated, but there's the rules have been drawn. The line has been drawn in the sand. You're either playing by the rules or you're not.
Right.
But that does not, and people are speaking that way. And give me laws, give me rules, let me advise my clients. The reality is that does not make for good business at the end of the day. They should be more worried about the supply, diversity of products, and meeting the demand at any cost.
Yes.
At any cost,
But that's not the case. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's certain businesses, like I can tell you that, every business that, Jamie has ever been involved in, for instance, I've always seen a high level of that commitment and passion. But I've also been in businesses where they don't give a fuck. They're selling weed, and you walk in, and some of them, it's like you're walking in, and it's not as bad now that it's so highly regulated, but there were businesses where it was clear where the motivation was, and that's fine. I mean, if you're going to sell it for that reason, that's all well and good, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. And the patients, for the most part, know what businesses have been behind them all along, and they're the ones they'll continue to support, and hopefully those businesses will continue to support those patients. But with rec looming on the horizon, I mean, that's a big cash cow, and they're going to have to figure out how to scale, because they can't even supply the market as it is now because of all the issues with the system.
Final question. If it's true that Lara's spokespeople had made the claim that it would be April that we'd be seeing the first recreational sales, what has been their justification for this shift?
I don't know how they could have even considered April. If the licenses are issued in December, April's even pushing it.
It's
to
pushing
pull a
it,
crop
but
off,
there's physically time for something
barely,
to happen. Right?
I mean, barely. Depends how, growing from seed, growing from you still have to have.
But they're not going to grow from seed.
No, even
it's going to be
growing from
interesting
clone,
to
it's
hear.
still the same.
There hasn't been much information
You
on
still need 10,
everything
12
that led to
weeks.
this, and it seems as though maybe it could have happened by head of
You need 8,
department
18,
instead of
16
necessarily
weeks.
the director in this case. For some reason, there seems as though there was some activity from some of the heavy-duty lobbyists that are out there that are known to kind of push interests of the big money, kind of more resourceful participants in the industry. So there's an incentive for somebody somewhere to push this. I think the half the inventory thing is part of it, and getting moving sooner than faster is part of it, and the state probably has some interest in getting the excise going sooner than later.
Michael's right. What a kick in the ass to the patients. And it's really kind of the state saying that we don't really acknowledge the patients as really being people with medical issues because we can just remove their medicine. We don't care.
It's more that we're making this and doing this for the businesses,
Right.
to raise revenue.
Just before they did this, the director was saying stuff like that.
Of course he was, but they've been saying that all along. Let's tax it. Let's make money off of it. That's, I mean, the story hasn't
but this
changed.
is beyond that. This is it's not even going to be available for the.
No, I know, but we all
It's
know
not
why that
available now.
happened.
There's a shortage
The-
for
I
patients.
understand that.
the-
If you take half of it
the
out
bi-
of the market,
The business
even
interests have their lobbyists in Lansing. And I'm certain they've been pushing for this, and they got it.
If there's a shortage, think about what has to happen. It has to be on their shelves for more than 30 days before they can turn it over. That means that if a patient comes in and wants to get cannabis, they say,
Some old
no,
flower.
we took it off the shelves,
Yeah.
30
They've
days.
got it in the back room waiting
Yeah.
out.
I mean, is that's the incentive, right?
There's going to be operators who do that, and you're right. And just like Jim said, there's going to be operators who would never do anything
That's
like
right.
that, and you have to establish a relationship. And it's all brand new, Michael. People are still trying to figure this all out.
And I think there is there's a trying to figure it out, and then there is the existing way. And I think that's the problem when you say this is the line. We don't care where the line should be drawn. We're going to draw it over here, And now we're going to play from over here, despite the fact that, all the real activity, the normal functioning of how this goes on, which has been taking place for a long time, is,
There was a system that was working pretty well instead of just kind of.
we agree on that. I
Working with
feel like
that.
it's silly that we're talking about it because the whole world.
Well, because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
that's,
matter.
That's one reason. But
doesn't mean we're wrong. I guess
no,
is what it
yeah,
is.
No, of course.
we agree on that.
And that system would have worked, but
In fact, the state's gone back to it. Had to go back to it
Of
a few
course.
times along the way just to keep
and
things
it was.
afloat.
It's a decentralized system. I don't think that you could get a system for supply that's any more resilient than that. But they want everybody in the boat now. They want everybody cutting them a check. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
How we doing, Tommy Two-Tone?
We're time for a break.
Endocannabinoid
Yeah,
deficiency
might need a little
syndrome
break.
sets in. Tommy can't talk.
Oh, Tommy.
He's got his mouthpiece in.
It's not
Yeah.
Tommy's job to talk.
Well,
He's
responsible for
behind
everything
the
else.
scenes. He's the great Oz.
that's true. That is true.
So, should we take a break? I think it's a good time to probably take
We
a
need
break.
a break.
I mean, we could.
Play a little music. We got some of that.
Is that what you want to do?
That was an excellent discussion. That
Yeah.
could be continued too.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Well,
no,
what's
we'll
number
go.
two? We're
Are
still
you-
on number one. We haven't went
he
at
have-
number two.
Does he have music queued up?
Yeah, I got them ready.
All right. You're
I'm just-
listening
maybe
to Planet
as a
Green
cliffhanger.
Trees.
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law. Komorn Law can take your case from arrest all the way from trial, appeals, and even to the Supreme Court. The team at Komorn Law has the compassion and the experience you can look to for help in your time of need. Komorn Law has over 25 years experience in criminal defense. We have accomplished numerous legislative changes through community involvement and lobbying. Our award-winning law firm has a reputation like no other for keeping overreaching government accountable and in check. We have built Komorn Law for people who need lawyers to stand up to the system, fight back and win. Once we become your lawyer, you become a part of our family. Don't settle for less, just ask our clients. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.
It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. It ain't fair, John Sinclair, in the stir for breathing air. Set him free, let him be, breathing air like you and me. What's the judge to do? What else can Judge Columba do? We got to set him free. This whole place went nuts. If he was a soldier man, shooting gooks in Vietnam. If he was CIA, selling dope and making hay, he'd be free, breathing air like you and me. What's a judge do? What else could Judge Columbo do? Well, we got to set him free. And sure enough, that was Saturday, and then next Monday, John Sinclair walked out of jail. And the Supreme Court issued an opinion in People versus John Sinclair that said, it's cruel, it's unusual, it's arbitrary, it's irrational, it's capricious, and it cannot be the law in the state of Michigan that we treat marijuana the same way we treat opioids. And they set him free. Hi, I'm Jeff Frazier. I'm one of the attorneys at Komorn Law in Michigan. And on behalf of poet John Sinclair, some doctors, some pharmacists, some organizations, we're suing the Michigan Board of Pharmacy to finally, once and for all, to remove marijuana from the Michigan list of controlled substances. John Sinclair was and is a poet provocateur, an adamant opponent and protester against America's involvement in the Vietnam War and all the bombings. He was organized together with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and the Black Panthers guys. And, he organized against the war. And in his words, we were protesting the war and we were advocating for the legalization of marijuana, all the while smoking vast quantities of it. We ought to do something about finally getting this plant off of the controlled substances list. We have law where the state of Michigan is licensing the medical use of marijuana. At the same time, it says under the Board of Pharmacy says under the Controlled Substances Act that it is still a controlled substance. And not only is it still a controlled substance, it's still a Schedule I controlled substance. And being Schedule I controlled substance means that it is contraband per se, and that its mere presence is evidence of a crime, and it justifies the raids. Michigan State Police spend 40% of their resources going after marijuana that is allowed for medical use, is licensed by the state, is now been voted into law by the people of this state to be legal for adult use. And yet it's still 40% of the police budget, still 40% of the prosecutor's daily load, it's still 40% of the Michigan State Police Crime Lab daily load. And it's still Schedule I, which justifies the stops, the searches, the seizures, and more importantly, the raids. And that means men with AR-15s and ski masks going in where men, women, and children and dogs and grandparents, are quietly sitting there watching TV. And because the neighbor complained of the smell of marijuana coming from a basement window, these patients or caregivers and now any citizen in the state is allowed to grow. The continued placement of marijuana on the Michigan State list of controlled substances is just simply absurd. Hopefully we'll get our hearing. If not, then we'll fight it out in the Court of Appeals and ultimately back to the Supreme Court that originally spoke in the case of John Sinclair back in 1971. It's time for, this absurdity that has forever lived at the heart of the drug war to be done with. And the way to do that is to take marijuana off the controlled substances list altogether. It's no longer to be policed. It's to be regulated. An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
What up, though? This Big Snoop Dogg when you're watching Hyped Up Live Session with my main man Tony Green. And that's right, tell him Big Snoop Dogg sent you. We looking for all that new talent in the Detroit area. Let's go, D.
Yeah, you know what time it is. All the way from the legendary Russell Industrial Center in the heart of Detroit City comes Hyped Up Live Sessions with your host, your boy T-Money Green, we've created a show to bring the very best talent from Detroit, from around the world, to you sitting on your couch. It's like a couch concert, baby, as you never experienced before. You could be the next artist to perform on a hyped up live stage. I know Detroit, I know the music in Detroit, and I gotta do it. You know me, or if you don't know, check it out. From the Dramatics to George Clinton to Snoop Dogg. If I said I'm bringing you the very best, I'm bringing you the very best in entertainment. Hyped up live sessions, the way we wish you would experience Detroit music. Couch concerts coming up.
Check this out, this your boy Warren G, and we're going hard right now with the hyped up live session with my homeboy T. And Graham, you better ask somebody. You don't know? Shut.
I was upper middle class, I had a yard of carpet grass. Worked backhoe 9 to 5, paid my union dues. But the chef came one day and he took it all away. Left me without anything to lose. They forfeited my car, they found some sugar in a jar. Told me it was probably suspicion of a crime. The other day I saw it being driven by the law, and them boys in back was gonna do some time. Well, forfeiture today, Lord, what a funny way to pay. Keep the peace so all our kids can go outside and play, without a cotton picking thing to lose. I got the Deep East Texas Task Force blues. Took my minibar and then they seized my VCR. It could be misused to watch a nasty video. They took away my kitchen all the time. My wife was bitching that it wasn't nothing but oregano. They said my herbal tea might cause a sinful ecstasy. Told me it could only lead to doing something hard. Took my ass to jail, they took my wife, paid my bail, took my double wide down to the county yard. Forfeiture today, Lord, what a funny way to pay. To keep the peace so all our kids can go outside and play, without a cotton picking thing to lose. I got the Oakland County Task Force blues. Without a cotton picking thing loose, I got them Oakland County Task Force blues.
Yeah.
It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We've completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Cheese. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan, and nationally and internationally, and even in Spaceland. Please welcome Tim Beck.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. Really glad to be on the show.
Thanks for staying with us. Planet Green Cheese, episode number 395. Is that right?
Correct.
Calling it Working Man. For those that are on the end, know what that means. There's an argument that we evolved from the cannabis plant. Let's just be honest, okay?
Ow, what's going on, everybody? How y'all doing?
420th episode. Yeah! Please welcome Steve Miller.
Steve Miller. Ow!
Thank you for the kind words, Michael.
We're here now still with Q, who, as I was trying to lay some kind of foundation before all the objections came, as it happens sometimes. What kind of agenda here? I see. I usually resist agendas, and I will tell you that I'm not really going to follow this. I mean,
This is a celebratory of the 420th show. Anything goes.
Please welcome my dear friend, looking like very Dylan-esque tonight, maybe more Laszlo Dylan-esque, if there's a thing. Jeff Frazier.
Presidents have had more people at their arraignment than I have. That's really funny.
If you're a connoisseur, you're going to want the good stuff. And if you want the good stuff, you're going to go for the mom and pop stuff because that's the good stuff.
We got Jamie Lowell.
Hey, don't leave the studio.
Don't leave the studio, Jamie Lowell.
It's just a real pleasure to come here and congratulate you on your 420th show, and thank you for having me on a few times over the 420.
Alrighty, we're back. Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Planet Green Trees, episode 440, I think it is, and we're calling
442.
442, and it's called Frisbee Rolling and Waiting for Colon.
Yeah.
Okay.
442.
He's not even showing up. What the hell?
Yeah, he didn't even show up.
Yeah. It's the last time we name a show after his ass.
Still waiting.
So I don't know if you heard the news. We're going to go to our next topic here. Here's the news.
What is it?
Drugged driving's on the rise.
No.
Drugged driving is on
Says
the rise.
who?
In Macomb.
Wow. Wow.
And Michigan. Not just Macomb, but and Michigan. Because Macomb doesn't count that.
Why is
Michigan.
Kent... well,
Let's say the article states Michigan Traffic Safety Resources prosecutor and also the head of PAM, Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan, speaks to the Traffic Safety Association of Macomb County. Pictures taken here by the Macomb Daily, and he says that the cat has left the bag.
Cat's out of the
And
bag.
he intentionally is offending all you cat lovers out there on legalized marijuana use in the state of Michigan.
What's going on out there, Macomb County resident
don't-
Jim Powers?
I don't want to
Then,
talk
the
about
statewide
it.
passage of the MRTMA Act in 2018, use of medical and recreational marijuana has jumped in the state, making the roads more dangerous as motorists drive under the influence, making prosecution of drug drivers more difficult for law enforcement.
Oh.
That was the theme of Ken Stecker of Michigan Traffic Safety Resource Prosecuting Attorney Association of Michigan, who spoke to the Traffic Safety Association of Macomb County on Thursday at Michigan Intermediate School District in Clinton Township. In 2014, THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, was the top drug found in motorists, drug driving, blood tests in the state of Michigan at 56% of the cases. In 2018, it was again the top drug in blood testing that blood testing with drugs found in Xanax second and fentanyl third, as opiate use continues to become a growing problem in Michigan. This comes from our Recreational Marijuana Act. Really? Back in 2014. This is what it's all about in our state right now, Stecker said, who spent much of his career prosecuting drunk driving offenses. He talks about the law a little bit. He speaks about the act allowing for 12 plants and 2.5 ounces. He said from 2003 to 2010, this is a great point.
Yeah.
It was easy for prosecutors and police investigating marijuana driving cases. They only had to show two elements: that the motorist was driving and that they had THC
Or
ingredient in marijuana, or TOOH, the metabolite. According to following consumption, THC is metabolized and oxidized, blah, 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 as we know that's the metabolite. The COH is the key metabolite used to detect marijuana consumption during blood and urine tests. It was a strict liability crime. But in 2010, the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that TOOH is not a Schedule I drug and will not be included in detection process. We'll come back to that.
Feasible.
That's feasible. After the court ruling, prosecutors had to show that the suspect was driving and contained THC, but detecting THC only is much more difficult. In 2013, the Supreme Court came down on another ruling regarding medical marijuana patients and driving, and after ruling, police and prosecutors had to show 3 elements for those drivers, specifically patients: that they are driving, that they have THC in the blood, and are under the influence or impaired by the cannabis. The language they relied on is the same that is in the Recreational Marijuana Act. Stecker said states' strict liability zero tolerance law has been undercut. Mm-hmm. And Stecker said proving THC is in the blood is difficult. I get a lot of questions about this. People say the marijuana stays in your blood for 60 days. Later, you can be convicted of a crime. If they're using it every day, sure, the THC is in their blood every day, but you have to show the active ingredient THC is in the blood at the time they are driving, he said. But THC dissipates quickly through the blood pretty rapidly, he says. It's not like alcohol where the more you drink, the number goes up. With marijuana, the THC is changing very quickly through the blood. Police need to officially promptly get the blood.
So is he suggesting that the more marijuana you consume, the number goes lower? I don't understand the argument. It makes no sense.
Well, he says this: scientific studies show people smoking marijuana often have 50 to 80 nanograms of THC in their blood after taking their last puff.
Oh.
In 30 minutes, it drops to 8%. I will agree that there's studies from Marilyn Hoistis, who is the federal-funded study, that indicates that there's a high spike, and then it gets down at 8, which is why an hour later
you're not as high.
Most of the blood testing, is in the 8.
You need to smoke another.
But it'll stay at 8 or 6 or whatever it is for a long time.
Yeah.
In an hour, it goes down to 5 or 6 nanograms.
Try to never let mine get down there. By the way.
No one ever thought you would,
keep
Jamie.
it at a steady level at all times.
400.
Wakes himself up every 45 minutes throughout the
400
evening.
to 470 range.
Yeah. He's got a honey drip in the bedroom.
Changing the marijuana laws have meant law enforcement has needed to be proactive and change their field sobriety tactics quickly to keep up. Trained drug recognition, he calls them experts. We don't call them experts. They're evaluators. Can now test saliva at the scene. 25 nanograms of THC in the saliva is the equivalent of 1 nanogram in the blood, Stecker said, and results can be obtained in 5 minutes. Stecker said Michigan is the only state in the country that has laws allowing for roadside testing of oral fluids or saliva. Everything is changing. It's always the will of the people, the Sheriff Wickersham said. From a law enforcement perspective, what we did 20 years ago, we did 5 years ago, and what we did last year is changing, so we have to change with it. We're fortunate to have one certified drug recognition. He calls him an expert. It's an evaluator. We have another one in training.
And training is like a few hours or something, right?
Well, the DRE evaluator trained by the police chiefs. It's not a scientific study. It's which I'll come back to in a second.
Either of the swab
We've
tests.
heard this complaint before. It's not as simple as driving and you've got THC in your system. That was real easy. The sheriff said, now we have to articulate on the field sobriety side, on the driving side, and making sure we are getting blood and proving our cases.
Oh, my God. Sounds horrible.
They have to actually get evidence to prove the case instead of the per se law. But this is going to be a lot more time-consuming.
It is more difficult.
Getting everybody up to speed. We're still going to have a lot of deputies that don't believe marijuana should be legal, really. And it's harder for them at times to say, kind of like alcohol, well, they can have it and we're just going to let it go. It's a real paradigm shift in our operation, in our enforcement for the marijuana side. We're going to say the county is, by the way, this was in...
well, that sounds like a reasonable observation right there.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like an excuse for anything. It's just a reality that's going to be tough for people to
change.
180 degrees. Let's fuck everybody over this stuff.
This is in
now it's okay.
November of 2019. Law has been in effect for a year. The idea that they're talking about having to change a year later when it's been in effect for a year is not something to brag about.
But I mean,
it's not surprising, but it's inappropriate. But it's not surprising.
What does the data say, though? I mean, we know that there's been a drastic reduction in the number of marijuana-related arrests overall in the state of Michigan since the law passed. And this other stuff, I mean, we knew the driving issue was going to come up, and we're just going to have to continue to work through it. And so far, things have gone fairly well for us. The state-mandated commission coming out and stating that there is no logical way to apply a per se limit to driving in marijuana is a huge step for us, and maybe it will stay this way for a while.
I want to address a couple of particular specific statements made here. Remember when I read the part that it was easier before in 2003 to 2010 because we could prove it was zero tolerance, any cannabis in your system, any THC or THC-OOH. Now, the fact that he says it, that it was easier to do this, knowing what we know now, what is he really saying? He's saying we used to convict people without any evidence of impairment all the time, and I'm not going to bat an eyelash. I'm not even saying that they were affected or could drive a car any worse than anyone else. It was just easier. Why is that something that someone's going to brag about? And why was it easier then? Because the law was wrong. What do I mean? Well, the Supreme Court found that the metabolite is not just not a Schedule I, it's not illegal. It's not illegal. It's not something that should be presented to the jury. It's not something that should be reported by the lab. It's not something that should be discussed. And knowing that a court of law has said that, for him to complain and say we used to be able to convict people with metabolites in their blood was easy, is him saying we used to convict people when they didn't have an illegal substance and we had no reason to convict them.
That's right.
Is there any way to see that any differently? I mean, is he ignoring the current existence? Is he putting up a scientific argument that the metabolite is in fact a controlled substance, should be treated differently? Is he accepting the Supreme Court's ruling on this? But to suggest that it was easier and that's okay, that law enforcement should be an easy gig?
Not only was it okay, but he wants to go back to that.
Well, I say that because if you think about what he's saying, to stand in front of a group of people trying to instill fear in them when the credibility that he's, the statements of his past have no credibility. They are statements of recognized error and mistakes and prosecutions of people that were probably not guilty of a crime, certainly would not be guilty of a crime today, even pre recreational.
He kind of relies on the ad populum concept that cannabis and driving is dangerous, and then when he describes this, everybody just assumes along with him that something must be done. We used to have an easier path to stopping these people, and now we don't anymore.
The problem is the data just doesn't support it. I mean, I believe overall,
I totally get that.
Fatal crashes just overall in the state of Michigan are down significantly this year.
All right, let's say this.
That's because of pot.
So then he complains about the Supreme Court in People versus Kuhn, where they identify patients as not being subject to the zero tolerance law. Now, mind you, when 2010 and Fiesel came out and said the metabolite is no longer a controlled substance and zero tolerance of it is no longer a crime, it's not a crime at all, there still remained the zero tolerance law, that is, if you had 1 nanogram of THC in your blood, then that was the equivalent of a drunk driving case. And this applied across the state. And he acknowledges that, and that still was something that they used to do in the past. And then the Michigan Supreme Court in People versus Kuhn interpreted Section 7 regarding the driving. You're not allowed to drive while impaired by cannabis. You can't operate heavy equipment. These are things that preclude you from protections. And that was interpreted to mean that patients are a select group of individuals that have protections for behavior that would otherwise be illegal, unlike everybody else.
Internal possession.
And their ingesting of it on its own does not equate to zero tolerance but instead the state would have to prove impairment. And despite that ruling, the continued fear-mongering goes on, because if in fact this was a real problem and a huge mistake of interpretation or a legitimate legal interpretation of what the MMA said, but the consequences of it were so severe regarding our public safety, could we all agree that we would know about it, that we would pinpoint those patients that caused accidents because they were driving impaired by cannabis and people were dying all over the place? Does that exist?
No.
I'm unaware of it.
Okay. And mind you, his statistics that he talks about of marijuana being in the blood of all the blood that's taken is just a number about it being in the blood. It doesn't mean that it was involved with an accident. It doesn't mean anything beyond. But still, staying with just the zero tolerance and the change in the law, and we have the lack of any evidence that the change of that law, granting patients the ability to have it in their system, so long as they're not impaired, had an impact on public safety. Yet, he recognized this is a problem for law enforcement. Still, however, they have the zero tolerance law to go after adults who have cannabis in their system, that being 1 nanogram. And let me tell you that having the 1 nanogram in your system also subjects you to all the penalties associated with being in an accident with a Schedule 1 in your system. Being an
It's a
accident
revenue generation issue. That's what he
it
meant.
becomes even more severe on these other crimes. But his assessment here of how it stays in the blood and whatnot is from studies that he's from, as I said, federal studies. There was always these are the same studies that said that they could not pinpoint a per se amount. But here's the thing I want to talk about. He does not mention in here, and I would say this adds to his lack of credibility, that the Impaired Driving Commission report. And this, let me see if I can get this straight. This is from the that's right, the Michigan State Police.
Ever heard
okay?
of them? Yeah.
And they reported to the legislature after being funded to do so in March of 2019, where they concluded that the amount of THC in one's blood has no bearing on whether they're impaired or not. So let's think about this for a second. The first woes me was that it's more difficult to get convictions because we used to be able to get convictions for a substance that's not even a controlled substance. Boo-hoo. Then we were able to get convictions for people that had any presence of a controlled substance. But what turned out? That the police told them that all the people you've been convicting with having any presence of a controlled substance is of no consequence. That it doesn't make any sense. This isn't the only study. It's one that they should honor, since it's their own people that created the study and submitted the study to say we can't, the science doesn't support a per se number. But he's here saying we used to be able to convict people for the very reason that the state police say is not a basis to convict them. And these two things are operating in the same world. He says that the recreational law conflicts with the zero tolerance. That shouldn't even be something to say. He should acknowledge that zero tolerance is not a basis to charge anyone with a crime, just based on this report. Just based on this report. This report says that is not a thing. You could have 1 nanogram and be impaired. You could have 80 nanograms and not be impaired. Now, the recreational law requires impairment to be shown. So, let me tell you a couple things that I've learned. And I would tell you that, there's no per se number. And, however, if a person's blood is taken and sent to the Michigan State Forensic Science Division, #Crime Factory, they will analyze the blood and they will report on the blood, and they'll do it in this particular way. They will give a number of one number that is purported to be the amount of THC in the blood. Then they'll give you a number of the amount of THCOOH11, which is the metabolite. It exists on the form since 2010, repeated over and over. And one would ask themselves, if it's not a controlled substance, it's not illegal, why is it being reported on the state lab's report. We have this Supreme Court case, and it's not a controlled substance. Why would this still be appearing in the Michigan State Forensic Science Division's reports if they know that their job as forensic scientists is to identify the substance, what it is, and then determine if it is found on the controlled substance list, and if so, report it. But here's a report. It's got the THC number and carboxy THC as well. Why would that be? I'll come back to that. The number of THC is one number. I'll give you an example. Got a case 17, okay? Mind you, when scientists talk about numbers, they usually talk about it with a decimal point and 2 zeros of some kind after that, right? It's not just 17. 17 point something, something. We have 17 reported once. All other Michigan State Police Forensic Science Division reports have articulated in their footnotes of their accreditation internationally for their ability to perform the test, and they will state a error rate or an uncertainty rate. In all of the alcohol blood tests, they will articulate a uncertainty rate. It's usually 0.04 in either direction, but the level of per se drunk is 0.8. The error rate of 0.04 means that it could be 0.84. You know, like if they took a sample of 0.8, put it in the machine or drew in someone's blood, that they could say that it would be within an error rate of either not higher than 0.84 or 0.76. And when they measure the machine, the data master, they use the same. That's the same error rate that is recognized, and something that only because that's what's been recognized they can establish it. Is it admissible in court? For example, the same error rate does not exist for the preliminary breath test, the one that's portable that they take in the car and have you take at the scene. It doesn't have the same authenticity, precision in taking the test over and over again. It's unreliable. It's not admissible in court. They can use it to arrest you, not admissible in court. So I'm back to the blood now. And this report does not have an error rate. So I have a case, 17 nanograms, and I file a motion asking for a Dauber hearing because I want to challenge the admissibility of this 17 nanograms and 140 whatever it is in carboxy THC because there's no error rate and it doesn't meet the scientific standard of what's required for admissibility. Jim, did I lose you? I felt like you're the only one that was paying attention.
I was. I still
I'm paying attention.
Okay.
I'm multitasking.
I'm listening too, but I'm watching Jim wrestle with these octopuses over
So, no wrestling with the octopus. Seriously, that's funny.
Don't tell
it's
me
funny.
what to do.
How can I not comment on that? So, this is what transpires after the motion's filed. So I want a Dauber hearing. I want them to bring in the lab, and I'm granted a Dauber hearing. In the meantime, I interact with the lab person, and I subpoenaed them to bring to court that they were going to testify by Polycom, so they sent to me via fax. And I knew this already because I got this out of another Michigan State blood examiner, that the error rate for the testing of THC in the blood, the uncertainty level, budget, 29%.
Wow.
29%. Not a number that would be admissible. Now, think about what that means for our friend and what he just said. 1 nanogram with a 29% error rate. 1 nanogram, 2 nanograms, okay? Just on a doc with no 0.0. The 17 they reported as it could be like 4.5 in either direction. 4.523 or something like that. So the idea is that the second test for the 17 could be 12, right? Then they take it again, it could be 8. Take it, you know, so and also they have 29% error rate. They have to have what? False positives. Yep. Okay? Now, as he talks here about zero tolerance, any presence, and you have a 29% error rate that they're not even reporting. Okay? So, I make an issue of this. It's non-scientific. Prosecutor responds in a motion saying that the error rate doesn't matter. You know why? Because there's no per se number. Meaning, accuracy of the lab is of no consequence. They threw a number on a page and they gave it to me. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's accurate because there's no person. This is what their argument is. Okay. Now, I would say the same thing because the report by the Michigan State Police says the number doesn't matter.
That's true.
Okay. So I'm kind of with her.
So maybe they're.
Yeah, but
they're
that's your
following,
argument also.
following
That's my
There's no
argument.
number.
But I'm saying it shouldn't come in at all because they can't establish the scientific requirements that they could produce this number over and over and over again and tell us what it would be within a certain range, right, Jim? This is what
That's right.
science demands. So that's her first argument. Then
Repeatability.
here's an exhibit attached. This should be the icing on the cake, and I hope. So, the lab person writes a letter to the prosecutor that she includes in this particular motion, and she says, the lab person says, "We had a conversation via telephone regarding measurement uncertainty and how it relates to toxicology reporting. Because when this prosecutor got my motion, she's like, what's he talking about? What's this? Called this lab person, they had a conversation. I offered to write an explanation of why the Michigan State Police toxicology discipline does not report measurement uncertainty for THC. The Forensic Science Division is accredited through the following organizations, institutions, accordingly. Maintaining that accreditation means that we must adhere to the requirements set forth in these particular guidelines. The general requirements for competence of testing and calibration laboratories." Okay, so they identify that there's scientific requirements for them to operate. General scientific requirements. They then go on to say there are hundreds of requirements that the laboratory must adhere to. However, the requirements that you're interested in, meaning of the ones we are required to participate in, you're interested in this particular one. She names it. It's known. It's something that they're aware of. It is of the hundreds of requirements that laboratories must adhere to. The specific one they're asking about is this one. It states, in addition to the requirements listed over here, test reports shall, where necessary for the interpretation of the test results, include the following. Where applicable, a statement on the estimated uncertainty of measurement. Information on uncertainty is needed in test reports when it is relevant to the validity or application of the test results. When it's relevant. When a customer's instructions so require, or when uncertainty affects compliance to a specific limit. When considering these particular requirements, 3 separate components are present that dictate whether the laboratory must report measurement uncertainty. Okay? So she's saying this is why we don't do it. First, when it is relevant to the validity or application of a test result. Measurement uncertainty is not required for the validity of toxicology disciplines tests. The validity of the test result is demonstrated through validations of the analytical testing process. In other words, the machine we use validates itself and it's accurate and it's already been. The toxicology discipline does not oversee the application of the test results, meaning they ship them off. Our customers are therefore responsible for the application of the test results. Second, when a customer's instruction so requires. The toxicology discipline's primary customers are the law enforcement agencies that submit samples and, to a lesser extent, the prosecuting attorneys. Neither the agency nor the prosecuting attorneys have requested this information to be included on the discipline's report. Now think about that for 1 second. They say, we know we're supposed to do this. We know that as scientists we must report uncertainty. Why don't we do it? Because our customers. Now, when I say customers, they use the word customers. If I said there's an inherent bias because it's called the Michigan State Forensic Science Division, they should not be under that tutelage and give the appearance of independent scientific methods.
Think what the better word
when they
would
use
be.
the word customers, it doesn't just imply that they are paying them to work for them. And the idea that because they're paying them, the police and prosecutors can tell the scientists how to report a document that has an error rate that would mean that the number that they're purporting and are going to use to convict and have for year after year after year is only being done because the prosecutors and the police tell them not to. Now, if you had a guess, who made the decision to do this? Does anyone come to mind? Head of traffic and safety? Do you think that there's an identifiable person that interacts with the lab as the customer of accountability that would say to them, you know what? Leave that off. How about this one? Keep on the metabolite. That's a huge number. There may be an instruction, but let that 100 and whatever just resonate, because we've got everyone so brainwashed on point, 8, whatever, then clearly you get 150 of THC nano, even though it's not a controlled substance, no effect whatsoever. Keep that on there. How could these things be going on in a universe that maintains itself, this organization, as scientific? Third, when the uncertainty affects compliance to the specification limit. In cases of alcohol, there are specification limits of 0.08 grams per milliliter and 0.17 for the super drunk. The toxicology discipline reports measurements of certainty with all alcohol cases because of these specification limits. There are no specification limits associated with THC or THCOH, and thus no requirement to report measurement uncertainty. It's the same argument the prosecutor made. Now think about that for a second. They themselves are saying, yeah, we made this measurement. We're not going to say it's accurate because we don't have to. There's no per se limit. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. It is. Only, and again, is this circumstantial evidence? Is it direct? I'm saying if you got a guy screaming and yelling in Macomb and cries about, and is disappointed with the way the laws change and how difficult it is to now prove a case for a driver and doesn't acknowledge that he's been getting convictions for things that there's no evidence that today was supported. It's not like people thought about this differently. It's that there's evidence that they've been doing it wrong. No apology, no undoing. They should have an expungement policy for that, shouldn't they? Zero tolerance, no bad drive. 3 nanograms, no bad driving. And then we learn that all along, I've never seen it like this. I've never seen the use of the word customer. I've never seen it used in such a way that customer's always right. Science doesn't matter. Got to keep our customer happy.
Just following orders.
It's a weird choice of word. I'm trying to think of what other word could be used.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a bizarre association.
The requesting agency.
Requesting agency, right? Mm-hmm. Makes more sense for sure.
In a way, they are defending their unscientific behavior by blaming it on the prosecutor and the police.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to make my case that the lab is, I'm ranting about how bad the lab is and how they're
But that's a public fact. That's a fact. It's a historical fact.
I'm saying to you that I'm disappointed with the leadership in the Traffic and Safety Division and their involvement with the lab and their use of their position of customer to influence the way that the lab is reporting substances in a way that is really fraudulent and misleading to the public.
Well, it's just not scientific. If you don't know the potential margin of error, it's very difficult to really be able to trust any data. And
the point is really, number one, is that the document itself is of no consequence. This report should cause the PAM to say, you know what, we're no longer going to try to admit into evidence the report. We're just going to ask for an instruction that there was the presence of THC.
Right.
Okay? So that's what they should be doing if they were really, but they're not. Instead they are, keeping from the defense lawyers, the jury that gets these reports, the error rate. So if you get down to a number of 1 or 2 or 3, it's a 29% error rate.
Yeah.
Is it plausible that they could have zero THC in their system? Of course.
I think if there's a high margin of error with any sort of scientific test, like you said, Michael, there's always a chance for false positives
There is
and false
in order
negatives.
to get 29%, you have to have false positives.
Right, and it's a fact, and that means that potentially, if the error rate is that high, then I mean, truly innocent people have gone to jail.
30%. It would, if you're sticking to that formula.
It's crazy. It's not good, man.
I'm wondering how many people are driving around with the X amount of nanograms in their system. How many patients are there in the state of Michigan who are not getting in traffic accidents and who are not having any difficulties driving? That's a statistic I'd like to know.
There's never been a correlation to cannabis in accidents. If there are any attempts to do so, it is always with some other substances.
I'm just saying there's so many registered patients, you would think it'd be an alarming rate if this was something we should be worried about.
That's my argument after Kuhn. That didn't happen.
Right.
When they, and if it did, we would hear about it.
And the way it is now is the way it should be, which is prove the 3 elements, right? They were driving, they had THC in their blood, and they were under the influence. That there was bad driving as a direct result of the substance being in their blood. And I don't think that's too much to ask of our law enforcement officers.
And if you're looking for some legal advice on this topic, I'm suggesting that those individuals who are placed in that scenario of being pulled out of the car and prodded and poked and talked into taking field sobriety tests.
Unless you're into that.
Yeah, right.
And or be subjected to drug recognition evaluators. It's my legal advice that you not participate.
Yeah, don't participate.
I'm
Just say no.
suggesting to you that you know very clearly, however, it's important that you know the distinction of what I'm talking about. If you are pulled out of the car and asked to participate in tests at the scene, that is what I'm calling field sobriety tests. They may be a series of different tests. One may be the swab, cheek swab test, saliva test. You do not have to take it. There's a civil infraction for that. I'm recommending you don't. 2 is the field sobriety test, the 3 that are standardized and exclusively for alcohol, and I'm talking about if you are being investigated for alcohol or cannabis. These tests, I'm telling you, you don't have to take. It's not a crime. There's no even civil infraction. You just do not have to do them if you don't want to. Now, if you don't do them, they may arrest you, but there's a reason why I say that.
If you do them, they may arrest you too.
Well, I'm going to say if you do them, you are going to get arrested.
Sure.
Okay, so if you're asked out of the car, and the only way that's going to get you back into the car to go home is to pass these tests, then you're going not back in the car. That's what's going to happen. It's just that simple. The other test I just want to mention is the preliminary breath test, the portable one that I was talking about. This too, an individual does not have to take. This is a civil infraction. However, if you are arrested and you are asked to submit to a chemical breath test, which is either the Data Master breathalyzer machine that is at the police station, not portable, sits on a desk. They turn it on, 15-minute observation period, and you submit by blowing into the machine. They do it twice usually. That, if you refuse to take that, you are subject to the implied consent law. The implied consent law, if found not in your favor, you lose your license for a year. There's also blood testing and there's urine testing. If after you've been arrested and you're supposed to be read your chemical test rights, they're supposed to tell you that if you do not take them, you will lose your license, and that usually does happen. Also, if you refuse these tests after you've been arrested, they will probably get a search warrant anyways, and the ability to do that has been simplified over the years in terms of electronic communications and not even needing to go to court. So it's a decision that's been made on a case-by-case basis. Each individual's different. I recommend you call a lawyer, but certainly that's a more difficult decision to make. But the easy decision is to not take any of the field sobriety tests that are being asked of you. So the 3 general field sobriety tests are the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, where they try to measure whether or not your eyes are moving in a smooth manner, smooth pursuit as you follow the pen light. There's different passes they'll take you through, and there's a couple other that deal with the at full extension, 45 degrees, whether your eye is bouncing off the side. They're all subjective. There's virtually no literature that says that alcohol alone is the only source. In fact, there's no eye doctor, ophthalmologist organization that's ever supported this as being a detection of alcohol. But that is what police officers use for the detection of alcohol. Nowhere in any literature does it say, in fact, the report itself, the Impaired Driving Commission, says that the field sobriety tests that one in particular, do not give any indicia of cannabis impairment. The other two being walk the invisible line 9 paces and turn around and walk back 9 paces is also a test that training tells officers isn't exclusively for sobriety of alcohol. And that, and of course the one leg stand. Those are the 3 tests that are given at the roadside regarding field sobriety. There may be others. They are not standardized. They are other ones they make up. Some are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, ABCs, backwards. I mean, just absurdities. So I'm suggesting that if they're asking you to get out of the car and they're asking you to do these tests, that it's very difficult to pass these tests. I would say, just as a matter of in passing, the Secretary of State doesn't require you to pass these tests to get a driver's license.
Right.
Why do you think that you're going to be able to pass it without ever practicing, without stretching out, without being given an opportunity to try a couple times and see what muscles are loose, and first time trying, that you're going to pass these tests?
Right.
If a police officer saw someone standing on one leg, trying to hold their one leg on the side of the road at 11 o'clock at night, they would go over to try to help them. But if you're pulled over at 11 o'clock at night, you're going to have to do that test to be able to go home. Okay? Who is the perfect person that can pass all these tests? Who's the, is it
Jamie?
Especially late at night. It might be cold out. There's lights coming.
I got pretty lucky one night with an alcohol-related sobriety testing scenario.
Yeah.
You passed them, so you're someone that passes them.
I was so wasted. But yet, well, first of all, I will say that I used to practice the alphabet and shit like that when I was driving.
See, just what Michael was saying.
And backwards and stuff like that. And I did that part of it, and he couldn't believe that I was able to pass it. So I was like, put your hands at your side, put your feet together, and look straight up at the sky. And if you're drunk, you can't do that without wobbling around. But I was standing right next to his huge-ass cop fucking bumper on the front of his car, and I had a little bit of my shin on that thing, and I was able to stabilize me. I looked up at the
Jamie, that is so Jamie.
He let me
this
drive
whole
off,
story,
and I was scared to drive off because I was so drunk. Man. I was swerve out of here.
Oh, Jamie.
Behind the blue.
That was the old days, though.
Right?
The old days.
Wow, that was not quite what Michael was expecting.
I don't think anybody was expecting that. Jesus.
Yeah, never give up is the
Right.
moral of that story.
Well, I'm saying to you that, if from a legal perspective, there's different, factors that go into the ultimate arrest and go into the ultimate decision of the jury whether you're impaired or not, right? And if you have the driving on video when they pull you over, and you have the interaction at the window, and these things are caught on video and audio, and that's all they have, versus they have that, and then they got you get in the car trying to pass these tests, that picture becomes so heavy of the field sobriety test that it ignores the, inculpatory evidence of you driving fine and you interacting with the officer fine. You know what I'm saying? And those things get put, but they should be equal, and they are really the things to best judge these particular things. Certainly not if I was to, first of all, the idea that you're supposed to balance with your hands at your side is absurd.
It's crazy.
It's hard to do when you're not drunk and
I was
under
going to
certain
say,
circumstances.
yeah.
But, yeah.
And there's other medical reasons that people would not be able to do that.
All
that
kinds
have
of
nothing
medical
to do with
reasons.
being impaired.
I mean, they have you do these tests if an airbag opens in an accident, it's absurd. A head damage.
You're already traumatized and upset to begin with, and
so horizontal gaze nystagmus, one of the indications of some lack, nystagmus would be a brain injury or a concussion of some kind. The image that comes to mind of somebody who would be able to walk heel to toe 9 paces and turn around is a tightrope walker, right? And they have usually hands on their side. They're carrying like a pole or something like that,
and
right?
they're barefoot, so they can grip, right? Or wearing something really.
And they've been training their entire life and walk with a certain posture and have strong muscular, legs that are
Or
holding.
they're Jamie Lowell.
They've had some strange experiences.
They've got his ass
around
clenched
the,
up on the
carnival.
tire of a state trooper car.
I was seeing tights when we said Jamie Lowell, like the tightrope walker and Jamie tights. I don't know.
Yeah, I got that image too.
Yeah, it's in a lot of people's spank bank.
Yep.
You're not alone.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy! Okay, so that's my case. I rest. What are we gonna do about it? Anyone want to?
I just want to know why they decided why Ken Stecker came to Macomb.
Well, you know why he came to Macomb. It's a hotbed of lunatics. Where else would he be?
I guess, but I don't understand it. And the data, it just doesn't support it. If they have data that there's a problem, then let's have the discussion. But so far, the data says...
Well, he's not saying the problem's health and public safety. The problem is revenue generation for them, for the police.
That is true. That's true.
We have to come up with a new gig for cops.
Yeah, well, there's a new emerging industry that many of them could quit being cops and start being entrepreneurs and managers and bud tenders and truck drivers.
Yeah.
Any number of things. But instead, we've got Ken Stecker in Macomb County, which makes me very sad.
Well, you're right there. You can counteract anything that he's doing.
No, it's too late.
Karate chop.
It's too late.
That's
when
right.
he's not looking.
And, I mean, do you see this guy?
Somebody was talking about
He does not look like...
nunchucks made out of
Does not look like...
broomsticks.
Yeah.
I think that might be effective.
Broomstick nunchucks?
Yeah. Are you familiar?
No.
Okay.
No, you have to show me.
Jamie and Ray apparently had this as a childhood experience.
Excellent. Well, I guess we can probably end early tonight. Because Michael is...
Yeah, because there's not enough time to bust into subject number 3. We did well, though. We followed the...
We did pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
We ate some octopi.
Octopi were ate and wrestled with.
That's good. Yeah. So...
For those at home, are we still Facebook Living it?
Yeah.
Okay. Did everyone pass that along and say hello to everyone?
Yeah, I know that John Schickler is checking us out. He's
Hi, John.
enjoying things tonight. He should be on the show again sometime soon.
He should come on down. Bring Mickey.
Yeah.
Come on down.
John, we miss you. You know you're welcome anytime. Well, there we are. Okay. Good. I see that. All right. So,
Sooner we end, the sooner some of us will be smoking again.
What? What are you talking about?
I think all of us. Except
Not
Tom.
everybody, not everybody's into it all the time. Or admits
Everybody's
it.
into it? Okay. Who's not into it?
Do you have any questions? Jamie, where are you going to be appearing this week? I know that's always the thing that people want to know.
Well, I'm not going to be appearing anywhere this week. I think
His
that's
appearances-
going to start slowing down.
Your appearances are behind you for the week.
Yeah, I think stuff's going to start slowing down. I
Yeah.
will say that Black Friday, I'll be up at the Botanical Company, East Tawas. There'll be also a church, Cannabis Company will be there for a vendor day. There'll be all types of great giveaways and prizes given away and all that kind of stuff. And then on December 15th is Acoustic Sunday with Razor Ray Reyes.
Yeah.
And with Vendor Day with Dory Edwards with her Dory Balm and other topicals that she has. And then in January, Rick and I are going to be at the Ypsi Library, January 23rd, I believe it is. I think there's some other stuff in there, too. I'm not thinking. Of course, Rick's December 5th Leaders Night or whatever.
Yeah, that's going to be a big event, a big swanky event.
In Lansing.
Lots of sponsors that everybody's familiar with.
So that should be fun, too.
I'm hearing
and
it's
all
gonna
types
be
of
fun.
stuff going on. But those appearances they're pretty rock solid for a while, but for better or worse, they're
Yeah,
slowing
but
down.
that's cool because the bad weather's rolling in, so you want to nest in the new place,
And maybe it means that there's less need for. Although there's still I'm assuming that as towns and cities that make these considerations, there will be some more times when we get asked to kind of come by and help out with the information.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I'm sure you'll find a way to make trouble somewhere for somebody.
It's already making trouble for us.
I'd like to
At
see the
all times.
I'd like to see the descheduling thing go down.
Right. Well.
You know.
And then of course we have the.
I'd like to see, as Michael would, people using science and logic more in decision-making processes, especially with policy and lawmaking.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That makes
That's
sense.
too much to ask for.
A world that makes sense when that makes sense.
So I might have to stay involved just out of that stuff not happening, and have a voice, or feel as though I have a voice, even though I won't really affect anything. I'll just have to do that for my own sanity, to think like I weighed in somehow. That might be what it ends up being.
Well, nothing could move forward unless you weighed in.
Yep.
Everybody knows that.
I've been rendered ineffective by the universe.
You got neutered by the universe?
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
I'm glad there's a lot of groups still around the state that either exist already, like John's group up in Northeast Michigan, the Normal, and the Cannapalooza group. Sometimes groups form out of need, like the Northfield group formed, and then organized a few rallies and town discussions and things like that. Those backyard groups make the biggest difference ultimately.
Yeah, it's a cool group up north.
And there's less and less need for people like myself and Rick to show up. People are understanding this issue a lot more.
Yeah, you guys are totally fucking irrelevant, so step back, let Jim take over.
I'll tell you what, well, Rick has not been irrelevant. He has been the superstar in the media all over the place the last couple of weeks.
Yes, the last
man.
couple of weeks they've been quoting him all over the place, I know. I'm just joking. You're totally relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, what has Rick been doing? I know he's getting involved with a lot of stuff. Why don't you say so people can go find out where that's
Well,
at?
it certainly is December 5th thing.
Yeah,
you
this is
definitely
the
check that out,
week discussing
MICBD. But also he's been with the Michigan Tech radio out of...
Yeah, he's been substitute
Roanoke.
hosting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been a guest host. He's guest hosting for Matt Roche, who's like of the family of Roche Racing and all that kind of stuff. And they do a lot of cool tech stuff, but he's not, from what I understand, against cannabis, but he's also not. That's not his gig. So since Rick has been on, he has had Rick bring on different cannabis perspectives, and he's had like Michael Toohey with talking about hemp, and Ken Harrell talking about the stock market, and Ryan Basor talking about his experience with having gone to prison and stuff like that. So
Good to see Ryan the other day.
And then he was one of the ones that was quoted saying, yeah, Brisboe was saying that we're going to do a slow rollout. We're going to allow for there to be a buildup of inventory in the system before moving forward. And then I think it was like the next day or within 2 days that the state made its move.
It changed his mind.
It changed its mind.
Somebody changed his mind for him. Something changed the minds.
Yeah.
Now, Rick didn't change his mind, but
no,
it changed its mind.
It changed its mind.
Yeah. It changed his mind. Let's go.
Yeah, the course was altered.
So I've kind of mixed feelings about it personally, I have to admit, but I do understand the perspective of the issue with the inventory and why it made sense after learning from the issues with the MMFLA rollout. To do it this way would ease some of the things that had to be dealt with along the way and during the rollout of the other program. So the idea of getting it moving sooner than later, at large, though, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
But very strange how it happened. Whether or not I kind of like it or don't like it or understand why it could be a problem. It's very strange how it got there.
Yeah.
And not real strange either, because obviously there's some driving force with resources behind it.
People are strange.
When you're a stranger.
Right.
Yeah.
Faces look ugly when you're alone. I think that's it, guys.
That's it. It's 10 o'clock, Michael, on the button.
Total
All right,
degradation,
perfect.
time to go.
It's time to
Have a
shut
good
it
night,
down.
everybody.
I like that. It's good. Good job.
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law. Komorn Law can take your case from arrest all the way from trial, appeals, and even to the Supreme Court. The team at Komorn Law has the compassion and the experience you can look to for help in your time of need. Komorn Law has over 25 years experience in criminal defense. We have accomplished numerous legislative changes through community involvement and lobbying. Our award-winning law firm has a reputation like no other for keeping overreaching government accountable and in check. We have built Komorn Law for people who need lawyers to stand up to the system, fight back and win. Once we become your lawyer, you become a part of our family. Don't settle for less, just ask our clients. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.